Hello everybody and welcome to this edition of Inside Insurance. My name is Jean Ray and I'm a consulting partner here at KPMG, where I'm responsible for looking after the non-life actuarial services practice. In today's edition we're going to focus on the role of the iNED, and to do that I'm delighted to have two really experienced insurance and financial services iNEDs with me here today. So starting with Yvonne. Yvonne is a chartered accountant and an independent non-executive director with over 30 years experience in financial services, with particular focus in insurance. She's currently on the board of directors of AmTrust International Underwriters DAC, which is a non-life insurance undertaking which writes a broad number of lines of business across Europe and US. And in addition, she's currently on the board of Zurich Life Assurance PLC, which writes life and pensions primarily in Ireland. And she's also serving on the boards of a number of banks. Prior to her iNED career, Yvonne spent nearly 10 years in MetLife, where she held several senior management positions, most recently as Vice President, Finance and EMEA Controller. Yvonne's career began in PwC, and she is a qualified chartered accountant. She holds a Bachelor's of Commerce degree and a postgraduate diploma in professional accounting from University College Dublin. So very strong CV there, Yvonne, and delighted to have you with us. Yvonne is joined by Aidan. Aidan is on the end there, has almost 40 years experience in insurance. He started his career in Irish Life, where he spent over 20 years. From there then he moved on to become Group CFO of Aviva, and he also worked with Aviva Europe. He was also CEO of SCOR Global Life Reinsurance Limited and also CEO of Monument in Ireland. He sits on various boards and he has, I suppose, a broad range of domestic and international insurance and reinsurance experience, and he also was a board member of Insurance Ireland. So thanks both for joining us today. Delighted to have you here with me to discuss the role of the iNED. So I might start with a curious question really, and that's really just to understand the role of the iNED, what's involved, and maybe with some particular focus in terms of some of the value you think iNEDs bring to boards. So I might start with you, Yvonne, if that's okay.
Thank you, Jean. I think one of the key things for an iNED, and it's in the title, is the independence perspective. I think when you're on a board and you're seeing an outside-in view, I think that can really help management in terms of how the company is operating from a governance point of view, and where you are sitting on other boards, you're bringing a market perspective as to what best practice is. And in particular, as you mentioned, I'm on insurance and banking, there is an overlap, and I think that can be helpful as well.
Aidan, anything you would like to add there?
I certainly agree with that. I think the variety of perspectives and the variety of experience that you can bring to companies, I don't mean that to sound conceited in any way, but in a lot of cases, having worked in insurance, people very much have an internal perspective of their company. There's a great opportunity to bring other perspectives and other experiences, whether it's from other firms in the insurance industry or, as Yvonne says, from outside of the insurance industry, where you can bring crossover experience and advice to the firm. So I think it's that external perspective, as well as the independence and the ability to put your hand up and say, I'm not buying that. That just doesn't ring true.
And I would add one other thing. The CBI at the moment, there's a lot of new regulation that everybody is dealing with. And I think it is helpful to understand what other companies are doing, what the developing best practice is, and share that. And again, I think life, non-life, banking, a lot of the regulation is similar. And I think that can be extremely helpful in terms of benchmarking how a company is doing relative to others.
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit like the role of the auditor.
Yes,
in ways.
exactly.
I was trying to count up collectively, I suppose, how much experience you have, right? So it's probably around 60 years, right? So significant, I suppose, experience across both of you, right? So
I'm feeling very old now.
Well, I've had in mind, I think we might get close to 100. So we're feeling, certainly feeling old as well. So I suppose over your time, right, what do you think has changed most? And I suppose, what do you think is probably most relevant for success now? I mean, you mentioned all the regulation and it's, I suppose, pretty fast paced and evolving, but just interested in your thoughts on that. I might come to you first, Aidan.
Yeah, one of the things I think has changed the most in my time in insurance is probably the amount of reporting, the granularity of reporting, and the speed of it. It's just transformationally different. I started work in the mid-80s. It's very, very different now than it was back then. But I'd add to that, one of the things that hasn't changed much for many firms is the quality of the underlying admin systems. There's lots of stuff done in terms of data warehouses, data models, moving to the cloud, all of those things. But the quality of the underlying systems, in many cases, they're still the same underlying systems. And that capability hasn't moved at all. And as a consequence, people have gotten stretched in between the two. So you have a fixed point of quality of your systems. You have a massive transformation in the demands and the speed of reporting. Yeah. And it's the people that have actually gotten stretched in between the two. That's probably one of the biggest changes I've seen over the years.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with Aidan. I think the pace of change over the last number of years has really accelerated. I think technology has completely changed, certainly since I left PwC, and I think that's tricky for companies to deal with. I think on the customer side, I think customers' expectations has evolved. They expect high levels of service quickly, and I think that's the other thing companies need to grapple with. And as Aidan says, with all the demands and everything kind of wanting now, I think that is tricky for companies and resourcing.
And maybe just to touch on some of that, I think you were touching on some challenges there. I suppose, what would you see as maybe the biggest challenges and opportunities for the industry right now?
Yeah, I think that one in particular, the quality of administration systems, when you go back to the core, there's lots of other stuff, general ledgers, data, all of that stuff has probably transformed quite a bit, but the core administration platforms, I think, are still relatively poor and based on very old technology. And there's a reason for that. The pain and suffering that migrating to new platforms it is phenomenal, and most people, many careers have ended as a result of people trying to do that. So I think that's a natural kind of handbrake on the industry. But I think that's a huge challenge. And I think that's where opportunities come for people to disrupt the industry. So people come in from outside with a different perspective, with a much more modern take in terms of technology. And I think the insurance industry leaves itself open to external threats as a result of that. So but that, for me, that would probably be one of the big obvious challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Aidan. I think the legacy admin systems is a challenge, and part of it is it doesn't capture all the data that perhaps we'd like now. I think it's hard to get data on some policy that was set up 10 years ago. And so I think for the life and pensions, where you have your policies for, it could be 20 years, 30 years, I think that definitely is more of a challenge. And it's not easy to replace admin systems, and it can be costly. Sometimes companies are forced into doing that if something's beginning to come to end of life. And it's really tricky to add on new technology onto something very old.
It is, yeah. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? The insurance industry should be steeped in data, but you're saying we have challenges extracting even the basic stuff. I might change tack a little bit, and delighted in particular to have you, Yvonne, with us, right, a senior female leader in insurance and a role model really to many, including myself. But I suppose just interested in your thoughts on D&I in particular, and what you think at the moment.
I mean, I think D&I is something which has been talked about actively for the last number of years. The focus tends to be on female male, which I think is only one form of diversity, and I think it needs to move away from that. When you look at boards, there definitely is an active move to making sure they are more balanced between male and female. I think the challenge now is making sure there's a diversity of skills. And mentioned earlier, my background is predominantly insurance, but yet I'm on a board of a couple of banks, and there is commonality between them. I mean, there are also differences, and I'd love to see more of a focus on different skill sets, when you submit your application into the CBI, it's very individually focused. It's looking at F&P from an individual perspective, and there can be a bias towards getting somebody with specific industry experience, and maybe that's not always the right thing because a board is a collective. And while the board itself may assess in the round using, with skills matrix, I don't think, I think we need to move to that kind of approach in terms of approvals.
And Aidan, just to get a male perspective on it.
I mean, I do think the debate needs to go far beyond gender. I think the need for people to be more open about their diversities. So as you join a board, as you contribute to a board, I think we need people to be more open about their backgrounds and what individual diversities they bring. I agree with you on the PCF approval process, on the CBI approval process. It's kind of a one-track process where you need insurance and experience, you need to be an actuary or an accountant, or basically the application is at least going to get questioned, if not rejected. I think you need to bring a balance to that, and the board needs to do a better job at looking at its pooled diversity and justify why it wants different experiences. And far too many boards, to be honest now, kind of suits us, but far too many boards are staffed with accountants and actuaries because that's the experience for the insurance industry. But you can see it in lots of places. There's gaps in terms of operations experience, there's gaps in terms of technology in some cases, and more the applications side of technology rather than the hardware side of it. So I do think that the debate has to go far beyond gender. And in fact, that's probably limiting the benefit of true D&I at the moment, in that companies are more focused, and indeed the regulator is more focused on gender balance rather than looking further into the broader definition of diversity.
That diversity of thought being quite important. Maybe just to finish, we might take a futuristic look at things, right? So if you were to take out your crystal ball and look 10 years into the future, I suppose what would you like to see the insurance market looking like in 10 years? And Yvonne, I might start with you. You mentioned life and pensions and health earlier, so we might touch on that sector in particular.
Yeah, I mean, I think still with life and pensions, it's, people don't wake up looking to invest in a pension policy or get life assurance. It's usually, I've bought a house, I need mortgage cover, or my company has an pension plan. It would be great for people to be more, to get better financial literacy. Easy to say, very hard to do, because it's not usually seen as something people really like. We'll see how things like Revolut, and they're pushing savings, they've started insurance. So we might have items like that helping to push a desire or a knowledge. But it would be great to be customer-led in terms of change rather than firm-led. And I think there needs to be a simplicity. I mean, I was renewing my health cover there not so long ago, and scrolling forever down the options to see what's available. So that's not very customer-centric. So I think there needs to be a customer-centric view, keeping things simple. But more education when kids are younger would also help.
Tricky to implement,
Very tricky, very tricky.
And Aidan, from a non-life perspective then?
I'd like to see more innovation. There's constantly new risks emerging. There's new threats and kind of new lines of business and so on that people are trying to run commercially. But the product set that we offer is still relatively limited and relatively static. Hasn't really, little bits of innovation here and there, but hasn't really changed that much in the last couple of decades. So I think if you take a 10-year or 20-year view, very substantial product innovation, whole new areas of risk that people are willing to pool and insure. I'd like to see. I think we've been remiss over the last few years, possibly as a result of struggling with reporting burdens, as we talked earlier, or implementing new regulation. I don't think the industry has actually done enough in terms of innovation, in terms of product and coverages and so on as well. With some exceptions, you get little bits of, like cyber is new, and providing kind of those sort of covers. But I think we need a lot more of that.
Yeah. As Yvonne says, you know, there is some disruption in terms of Revolut and other kind of players. Without insurance now in Ireland, so it'll be interesting to see what that does as well. So interesting times ahead, and hopefully the future is bright. Fingers crossed. So thanks a million for joining me both. Fascinating discussion today. And I suppose if any of the topics we discussed today resonated with you listening, please feel free to get in touch with me or your usual KPMG contact. So that just leaves it for me to wrap up and hopefully welcome you again to one of our sessions in the future. So thanks for joining today.